William is on his way, but before we started, we wanted to just poll everybody to know what is it that you actually wanted us to talk about. Yes, we can talk about the making of the festival, but what I thought would be more interesting is to talk about the work that both Namita and William do, their literary work, as opposed to just festival stuff. So anybody who really wants us to only talk about the festival,
want to talk about the festival.
Put up your hand. Okay, so that's only you. So we'll talk about their literary work. Is that okay? And we'll weave that into the festival. So Namita, you wrote your first somewhat mischievous book, which received. Oh, William, thank you so much for gracing us. William, as you all know, he's the bad boy of the flock. We both are the sober people.
So says Sanjoy.
So I've polled everybody, Willie. Yes. So I've polled everybody, and everybody wants to hear about your works rather than the festival. Everybody, the audience, yeah. So, okay, and festival, and I will beat you. So Namita, tell us how you wrote Paro, and what's the kind of effect that it had both on your family as well as society, and how did it change your mindscape?
Well, nowadays most people see me as the person behind the Jaipur Literature Festival, one of the persons behind the Jaipur Literature Festival, but that's the persona they know, recognize, and that gets around. But I had a very early brush with being completely notorious in Delhi social circles, because when I was very young, I was studying in Delhi University, and I was a very hardworking and dedicated student. But all kinds
as you are as a director of the
as
Jaipur
I
Literature
am.
Festival.
But I was also, as I am in the festival, very determined to be involved with the Indian literatures in the Indian languages. So I chose that course. There was a nun who was a bit more fond of me than was strictly possible. And a lot of things went wrong, and I found that I was 19, I was married, and I was out of college. And so I never did get to graduate. And it's a very long story, which I won't tell now because it's a different story. But what happened was that I got out of the academic training into the big wide world, and I started a film magazine. And for 7 years, from the age of 19 to whatever, I published a film magazine which became one of the most popular film magazines in India and got a huge circulation. But it always made a loss in the years when it should have made a profit. And one year, when my husband invested a certain amount of money in it, thinking it'll make a loss again, it made a profit. So everything went away entire. So it shut down after 7 years. But I learned there about the intersection of what is popular and what is well written. And that is a lesson which stood by me all my life. And so, with all the academic training which I had a natural aptitude for, and then running a popular film magazine, which gave me a different Bollywood angle, though the word Bollywood was not even invented those days. And then I sat down and wrote a novel called Paro, Dreams of Passion. And this was published when I was 26. And when my father, I was already married, and my husband once saw it, and he was a bit alarmed because he had a Japanese business partner and who read this manuscript on the typewriter, and it was not the most conventional thing. And my father said, I hope you've been discreet. And of course, I've never been a very discreet person. This book got a lot of international attention. It was published when I was 27, and it was considered the first Saudi ripper of its time. So it's always been a very up and down things, you know. It was an up and down thing.
Talking about up and down, Willie, your first book, Xanadu, there you were trying to do this as a student. I think you were still a student, and you set off to do this incredible journey that Marco Polo did, all the way to trace Kublai Khan's palace in Xanadu. And who did you manage to take with you? In the first half, somebody who you met 2 weeks just before you set off, and in the second half, your former but new ex-girlfriend or some such. Was the journey motivated by the girlfriend?
I should say, completely up straight, this was an almost completely chaste journey, Sanjoy, before you go any further. We've never actually done a session like this before. I didn't know half of this. So no, I had planned this trip and I was very lucky at Cambridge. My college had a whole variety of rather bizarre grants left by elderly dons who were single and didn't have anyone to lend their money to. And if you went through the notice boards on the college notice board, there was almost certainly some prize which almost nobody else would bother applying for. And this particular one was a travel scholarship for medieval historians left by some elderly don who died in the 1920s to encourage bright young boys to go off to Sicily and see Norman mosaics or something. And I saw this and realized, I knew for a fact there were only about 4 other medieval historians in the entire college. So I went straight to the university library, got out the Times Atlas of World History, so it was the longest possible journey on the basis that, on the basis that I could probably apply for more money. And of course it was Marco Polo's trip, which in the Times Atlas of World History covered 2 wonderful foolscap pages. So I typed out a couple of sides of A4 off the top of my head on the way back from the pub one evening, just literally as light-heartedly as that.
Without Google?
Within the days before Google, in the days of manual typewriters. And to both excitement and slight sort of foreboding, a cheque for £750, which was a lot of money. I mean, I'd never had money like this in my hands before, arrived under my college door 2 weeks later. And I found I was committed to this. And it happened almost exactly the same moment. I'd just been dropped by my college girlfriend of the previous year and a half, who'd run off with somebody else. So I had this money to do this trip, wisely or not. Actually, very unwisely considering the guy she ran off with, but that's another story. And shortly afterwards, I met this incredibly sort of frightening woman called Laura, who had already sort of taken on, she'd been caught in the riots in 1984 in Delhi, and she was an Oxford hockey blue and had apparently gone out with a hockey stick and left some gang of rapists permanently incapacitated, and there's a whole legend attached to it. She was a cross between sort of Boudder and one of those sort of Johnny Hockey Sticks actresses from the 1950s, Joyce Grenfell, or one of those characters. And she organised me, disciplined me, made me turn up for visas and all sorts of things which I had forgotten and been too ineffective and chaotic to have managed. And this woman, one of the great sort of joys of this story is that this woman has gone on to be now Britain's highest paid female executive. She's taken over Marks and Spencer, and there was a huge thing all over the British papers, and Xanadu was back on the front page ever. First time I've ever been on the front page of every newspaper in Britain a month ago when she...
Did you leave on good terms? Can we go to her for sponsorship?
On good terms with both of them, but I checked, they had a right of veto and everything in the manuscript. And Laura merely changed, I'd written her down for a hockey blue, and she'd put in ice hockey blue. But she was all over the front page of the British papers because as the highest paid woman executive in Britain, she has just gone on, in typical form, has just gone on maternity leave for the first time, age 50. And they had to, so important is she these days, that Marks and Spencer had to announce her pregnancy at the stock exchange. And it affected the Marks and Spencer share price. Wow. Anyway,
but when you set off, did you have a book in mind, or did the book sort of happen?
I've always known that the one thing I can really do is write. I'm too chaotic to hold down a job and can't add up and would never have made a banker or a lawyer or anything like that. And have always known that I could scribble for a living. And so, although I was still at college, I already had an agent, actually. And we put in the proposal for the book pretty quick. And it came out within 6 months of me finishing finals.
Wow.
For the first time.
Your present publishers will be very happy to hear that. 6 months.
Well, I've been very loyal to mutually loyal to the editor who bought me, age 21, who I'm still with now at the age of 50. I've only had one editor. A man called Mike Fishwick was with HarperCollins, now with Bloomsbury.
Namita, going on, you went on to write this wonderful book, which I don't know whether any of you will have the occasion to find at the bookstore, but it's called God's Graves and Grandmothers, which I had the privilege of then later converting it to a theatre production.
Was that the first time you two worked together?
Yes, yes, I think that's the first time we encountered
play.
each other.
Right.
Yeah. Will you share where that book came from? Because it was such a specific book, both in terms of Delhi, in terms of the way it looked at religion, the age group of it, the demographics of what you addressed.
The first book I wrote was such a huge success, and it got me so much fame and so much attention that I was uncomfortable going on writing the same way. And I wrote a very, very depressing novel, which then nobody wanted to publish. And so for 12 years or so, or 10 years, that novel just lay in a bottom drawer with many, many rejection slips. And then I got cancer when I was about 34. And in those days, cancer was much more non-negotiable than it is now. And I realized I had very little time. So then when I got out of the hospital, I said, I've got to write a book. And so I was recovering, and near a house there was a construction site with these 3 stones where somebody had built a small little shrine. And as you may remember, that's how the novel began. And I was just in a hurry to finish it before I might have gone on to the other world. And I think if you write in a hurry, a book comes out well sometimes. And that was my 3rd novel, but it was published 2nd. So I had a long period in between where I was just considered a flash-in-the-pan author with just a well-known first book.
And remind me, in the book, was there already music, or did we invent that only for the play?
You invented that.
Oh, okay, I couldn't remember.
Because Sanjoy directed it, and it was part of the partnership that began with Sanjoy and Teamworks of actually watching how things work behind the scenes, to watch the script and the dialogue and the music come alive. It was an absolutely exhilarating experience. And for those of you who want to know about festivals, that's what it is like even here, because I'm determined to talk about festivals a little bit.
And in fact, the hero who played
yes, that's
the role is now, what's the name of this serial? Big Bang Theory. Kunal Nair, who's just signed a $24 million one-season deal.
And we're getting to the festival this coming year, but it was so wonderful because there was this good-looking young man there, and he's just moved on and on and on. But yeah, it was a very great time.
Willie, when did you discover, when did India discover you? Or when did you discover India? Because your forefathers had obviously been back and forth and ruled us and sort of, bullied poor Bengalis like me, and then you came back again.
And married poor Bengalis, not like you, but rather... Yes, I mean, I turned out to have Bengali blood, and indeed Mughal blood.
Do you?
Neither of which, I have a great-great-grandmother from Chandanagar. I've told you about this before. Anyway, it's kind of this strange bond between us, Sanjoy. But it was never part of my childhood at all. I was brought up in provincial Scotland, in a very beautiful place, very far away from the heart of things. And was always interested in history and was a rather sort of geeky little teenager bicycling around village churches as a 13-year-old. And arrived in India through a series of accidents, aged 18, very untraveled, had seen very, very little of the world. And I really wanted to go to Iraq. I was an archaeologist at that stage and had spent all my childhood, teenage holidays digging on various archaeological digs, and had arranged a very glamorous-sounding dig in Iraq, working on a site that Leonard Woolley and Agatha Christie had worked on in the interwar period. And it was a sort of dream come true. This was everything I'd wanted to do. But just, I think, a month before I was due to fly, Saddam Hussein closed down the British School of Archaeology, saying it was a nest of British spies, which it may well have been for all I know. And so I had nowhere to go and nothing to do, and a friend was going to India. And although I had no interest, and actually had a kind of mild aversion to India, my elder brother, who I worshipped as a teenager, who'd been a sort of cricket blue and a rugby blue and everything that a younger brother wants an elder brother to be, had gone off to India as this sort of bright young man and come back as this sort of dreadlocked hippie, making South Indian coffee in the bathroom and filling his room with strange sort of Tamil tack with long sort of Osho robes. And this had given me, not for any of India's own fault, but simply because of this family accident, had made me rather sort of disapproving of India as a teenager. But my friend was going there, my best friend, and I had nothing else to do, so I jumped on a plane. And in a sense, I'm really still there 35 years later.
And how did, wow, okay, and how did City of Jinns come about?
I remember almost my first day of arrival in Delhi, going out of Delhi by the ISBT on the bus to Dehradun, where I was teaching, and seeing the walls of Delhi and thinking, oh, what a wonderful, this must have been Kashmiri Gate, which now a lot of it's been destroyed, and what's it called, Qudsi Bagh, next to it, and the domes of that mosque, and thinking, oh, what a wonderful city, I must come back and write something about it. It looks so extraordinary and what rich history. And I did. I came straight back after university when In Xanadu had come out. In Xanadu had a very lucky break. It was this moment when travel books and so on were doing very well. And City of Jinns became my second book. And I've now written, I suppose, 9 books.
He just flashed the sign of timing. So, Namita, you actually preceded the whole Jaipur Literature Festival thing by setting up the Nimrana literature program 2 years before, 3 years before. Just tell us what inspired you to do that, moving into festivals, being this full-time author, and then moving into a festival.
You know, I used to meet a lot of Indian language writers, and I found that the English writers in India were very privileged in those days because they would sometimes get advances in dollars and pounds. And in those days, everybody in India was wonderstruck and glamour-struck by them. And the Indian languages were completely ignored. We have 24 national languages in India, thousands of dialects and mother tongues. And the Hindi writers and the Bengali writers hated the English writers. And sometimes I'd meet them and, I mean, they would hate me as well. And I understood their hatred because there was a divide, all the Indian languages and the English writers, and the English writers were getting all the space. So then I helped organize by a series of accidents a path-breaking festival of the first ever international festival of Indian literature in Nimrana in 2002, where we had Amitav Ghosh, where we had Sir V.S. Naipaul, where we had Vikram
Where you had the biggest spat possible.
Biggest spat. Everything I do with festivals gets a little bit of that kind of energy. It hasn't happened here yet.
Give it time.
and then this was the first time when the Indian languages actually got together and spoke to each other. And there was a lot of anger and a lot of venting, and people thought I'd be upset, but I was actually delighted because only after those angers are aired do you get conversations, as we now do in Jaipur.
And attacks from Amitav Ghosh on Roberto Calasso.
Yes, indeed.
Willie, do you think this is one of the things that makes the festival so successful? You know, our politically incorrect statement, but the brown and white that we keep talking about, and the kind of programming, therefore, that comes out of it, where you have two completely different kinds of cultures, the Western traditions and then the Asian and the Indian traditions coming together on the same platform. So different perspectives, which is something that we've tried to do here. Is that, you feel, one of the main...
Yes, I mean, I mean, a lot of it, I think, is due to this strange chemistry, the fact that Namita and I have very different literary specialities, and we both bring something completely different to the table.
But it's not, if I could point out at this stage, it's not always brown and white or Indian and this thing, because there may be some areas of international literature where I am more sensitive than William, or there are parts of Indian culture. For example, in the Indian arts, where William's knowledge of Indian art leads to a very, very deep programming of those areas, which I
and
so it's just, as you said, different areas.
In a sense, it's two different parts coming together, and there's very little areas of crossover, therefore very little areas of conflict or competition.
We are like the white and yellow of one egg.
It's not always as simple as that, but I'm just going to open it. I'm just going to open it out, but before I do, just going back to the festival bit, I just wanted to say that, the couple of things that's made this, the Jaipur Literature Festival such a phenomenon, and I think we all agree with it, one is, of course, the incredible programming and the list that both the festival directors bring to bear at the festival year on year. And if you see the 2016 list, some of that will be already evident. But it's also about the location, and I keep saying it's finally location, location, location. We inherited Diggy Palace, this wonderful old country home, well, sort of large country home, in Jaipur, and the fact that Jaipur in itself is this great place of nostalgia, of history, of built heritage, where every stone is waiting to tell its story of betrayal, of love, of passion, of war, and that, in a sense, brings the literature alive. And then it's the color, some of it which we've tried to translate here into Boulder with the cloth upstairs and the flags outside. And then finally, it's really about the great big Indian wedding hospitality, where thousands of people are fed and thousands of people come through, and this incredible music and this mix of amazing people who come together from all parts of the world and all parts of India. And that energy that is generated by the audiences, and our largest venue is 6,500 people, and our smallest is now 330. That energy that's generated there everybody goes away
and the fact that it's
with
free,
that sense,
and therefore
and the fact
accessible
that it's free.
to young people.
Yeah, and the reason why we've always kept it free is because we believe that in this very unequal world, the one thing that can bring about some sense of equity is the sharing of knowledge. And unless we're able to share that on a democratic platform, we'll never be able to create opportunities and platforms for those communities who are disadvantaged to come and experience the same kind of things that people like us do. And having said that, let's open this up to the audience, and anybody has a question. You had a question. Nine Lives.
This is a book, I teach at Naropa University, and right now I'm teaching a Hindu Tantra yoga course, and my MA students are studying your character from the Kali tradition and how it came about, and really that felt experience. And I'm just amazed at how you have approached it, so I would love to hear more.
So 9 Lives, my most recent book, but one, was for me exciting because it was a return to travel writing in many ways. When I was starting up, I was really a travel writer. In Xanadu, City of Jinns, Holy Mountain, all three are books of me going out with a notebook, taking interviews, recording impressions, and then coming back and writing it up. And after I had kids, I went off and became a historian because it meant traveling less. When the kids were small, you really don't want to be sort of hopping around the Hindu Kush and diving into Afghanistan. You want to spend time with your babies. So I turned into a sort of commuter. I used to go to the British Library every day and research white moguls. And when I moved back to India in 2004, the kids were a bit older and it was possible to start traveling again. And 9 Lives came out of a deep interest in religion in general, not just the Indian religions. My parents are deeply committed stroke fundamentalist Catholics, and I went to a monastic school, and though I am not personally a practicing Catholic anymore, I think once you come from a religious background, you can never quite see the world in the same way again. The religion, you understand the importance of religion and how it can alter the way that people see things and how they shape their lives. And I was very intrigued by how the India I returned to in 2004, which was at that point growing at sort of whatever it was, 9.1% or 8.9%, how these and sort of very different forms of religion practiced in different parts of India, not just the obvious divides of Jain, Hindu, Muslim, but the many regional manifestations of Hinduism, such as the Devdasi, the Devdasis of Belgaum in Karnataka, who are a form of sacred prostitute, or the tantrics in Bengal, or the bards in Rajasthan who sing the Papuji tradition, or the Teyam dancers in Kerala, who are well known in Kerala but completely unknown elsewhere, who manifest various deities as part of a kind of shamanistic dance, or the Bauls, who are these wonderful happy-go-lucky wandering minstrels across Bengal. And I was very keen, having read a lot of Western writing on Indian religion, I was very keen that I didn't make it about me and my spiritual search. It'd be a kind of, an eat, pray, love with only the pray bit of it. Because I think so often Westerners impose themselves between Indian religion and the truth. And so I was very keen just to really do it in a very documentary fashion. Amitabha yesterday mentioned Studd's Turkle. It's that sort of approach whereby you're trying, as far as is possible, it's never going to be completely possible, but trying as far as it's possible to be a completely transparent glass and recording this person's life. And while there are fragments of travel in it, my own journey to various places with these characters or traveling around with them and description, it's really, all 9 of them are first-person narratives. They're talking to me in the first person about their experiences. And of course, I'm editing it and forming it and shaping it, but I'm trying to make it, as far as possible, their record of why they've taken the paths.
There's a question at the back. Just wait for the mic. And are there any other questions? Because I know we're running out. I would have taken them in clusters. Anybody else? And one in the front. Immediately answer, and then I will answer both.
I'm wondering about the numbers this weekend here. How many people came?
So very quickly, we've had, till yesterday evening, we had 875 unique visitors, which translated into about 3,500 foot. So if you sold a ticket to every session, we would have had about 3,500 tickets sold yesterday. I don't have the numbers today, and I'll have that this evening, which in a sense for us is really spectacular. Even in our first year, in our first outing in South Bank, it was literally 1/3 of that. So while we would have loved another 1,000 people coming through our doors, I think for the first year we've done very well. And most importantly, people have come from across America, from Washington, New York, Dallas, Pasadena, Cedar Falls, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Jose, and some other places I can't remember. So, and that's really what we wanted it to be, a place that people would come to for the weekend, and we're very happy that that's happened. Challenging that there's no traction itself in Boulder or Denver. Yes, we've had some people coming in, but by and large, people don't even know that this exists. And we're not sure how to get that word out because, you know, there's not enough press here, there's not enough local television stations who can send crews out. So those are some of the challenges that we will be faced with in the future.
I would like to make a comment. Many of the sessions we attended, and we have been here since yesterday, only a few hours to sleep. Today, there is a group of people which is converging. They live here, and some of them are Indians. What we see happening, we will meet here because we are all in Boulder and discuss critically issues that are coming up. And then we need somebody, if this takes some momentum, somebody to communicate at the festival and have some suggestions, some input of this festival. So who would that be? Maybe we can
So, you know, our email IDs are available on all the literature that's gone out. So if you send in your comments, we're very good with responding immediately. We have a whole process by which we will be looking at next year's festival dates and programs, so please do so immediately.
So are you planning the next event in the US in Boulder?
It's 23rd, 24th, 25th of September 2016.
Here?
Yeah. Thank you.
So what is the deadline by which to give you some feedback?
This week? Next week? Because what happens is, you know, we work the festivals in an 18-month cycle. Right now, if you look at acceptances, they're already for 2017. Simon Sebag Montefiore was saying, you know, put me down for 17, for example. So we work constantly. So we need, you know, otherwise we move on. In teamwork, we run 26 annual festivals in 30 cities across the world. So we need to do it now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much for coming. William Dalrymple, Namita Gokhale. Thank you all for being part of the festival.